Okay, the second item is the 2020 budget that we annually do. I'll be as brief as possible. Then if council or anybody in the audience has any questions, they're more than welcome to ask at the end of the about any items on the agenda, any questions of council or me. The public hearings for the 2020 budget will be Thursday, November 7th, which will be during the agenda setting meeting, and also Thursday, November the 14th. The budget this year is a decrease of 1.45%, a modest decrease. It is virtually the same as last year's budget in some respects, in most respects, but in other respects it is not. The revenues are outlined below. The majority of revenues that we have, they're basically in line with what we've had in past years. Approximately $24 million will be collected in taxes, and that hasn't changed all that much. They're conservatively estimated. The biggest difference with this year's budget is there will not be a transfer to the OPEB fund. We usually transfer $1 million and usually transfer back out $1 million, depending on how the stock market is doing. What has occurred over the last 3 years, is that the OPEB fund owes the general fund approximately $3.6 million. There's an accounts receivable on the balance sheet of the general fund of $3.6 million, and it is about time that maybe it paid it back, but instead of paying it back, we're not going to do a transfer in there. What we've done the last 2 years, because the stock market has done well, we've taken winnings off the table, so to speak, and put it back into the general fund. Now, that hasn't been $1 million, though. This year it was $750,000. So there will not be a transfer into the OPEB fund. The significant increase, among others, is usually health care costs, and I'll explain that a little bit later as we move along here. Our fund balance is doing well, and our fund balance has done well the last 3 years. And as I've mentioned last year, there's 3 reasons why our fund balance has done well. The biggest one is the tax office has done a great job of collecting delinquencies more on the business tax and the mercantile tax. The second reason is that in past years, not including 2018, we had not hired positions that we budgeted for, and we started to hire those people in the latter part of 17, moving into 18. So that reason the fund balance has grown is no longer exists. The people that were budgeted, they've been replaced, and we're moving forward, and we are hiring other people for other positions. And the other is that I commend the department heads for, keeping their eye on their budgets and making sure they stay within their budget. So those 3 reasons is why our fund balance has increased. And we need a steady revenue stream in our capital improvement program, as I have said for the past, 5-6 years. And we did partially that when we adopted last year the Pollution Control and Flood Reduction Ordinance. That gives us a steady revenue stream from every individual house and also the commercial properties. The residential is $120 per year. And that gives us a steady revenue stream for the stormwater management in Monroeville, and that is a good thing. But in the past, what we've done for the last 5 years is we've transferred $1 million into the capital, and that's not nearly enough. And council knows that, evidenced by what they've done the last 2 years. They've increased the road program. Last year we spent $1.9 million on roads. We have a capital improvement, 5-year capital improvement plan that council, it's going to be presented to council in the next couple months here, and they're going to be making decisions on the priority of capital items moving forward. Not operational, this is more operational. And so what I'm doing is I'm recommending, and I do have in the budget, a transfer of $2.5 million into the capital improvement. Most of the time it's been $1 million. And as we move along with the capital improvement program in the very early part of 2020 or the late part of this year, most likely, that transfer is probably going to have to increase with an amendment to the budget. Because as we move through, and council knows off the top of their head on what needs to be fixed in this community with respect to roads, with respect to buildings, vehicles, and all the capital items. To give you an example, as I have in past years, Mr. Hugus has let me know how many miles of roads we've paved. This year, we paved 2.3 miles of road. We should be paving, to keep up with it, 7 miles of road. This is paving. This isn't sealing. This is milling and paving. We should be paving 7 miles of road a year. We're nowhere near that. We should be spending $2 million a year just on roads alone. Last year, we spent $1.9 million, but that wasn't all paving. That was fog sealing, and that was crack sealing. One of the items that has come up that council's aware of with respect to capital is we have to have all our buildings secured. With everything that's happened in this country with respect to violent incidences, we have had an assessment done in this building, in the Public Works building, the library, and the Senior Citizen Center, and that's going to be part of our capital improvement program, securing these buildings with respect to people entering them, who can enter them, and it's a public building, so it has to be done very carefully. Most public buildings you go into, if anybody's been in the city-county building, downtown, or any place else, you have to empty your pockets, and you have to either sign into a private building if you're going in downtown. And right now, we have to change that in this building and all the buildings we have so that they are more secure. We've had an assessment done, and council has a copy of that assessment. Part of the formulation of the capital improvement program, in the past, I've recommended a 1 mil tax increase to council to go only towards capital projects. Last year, I didn't recommend that. The reason why was because our fund balance is very healthy. And I'm recommending the same thing this year, that we do not increase taxes. Now, moving along, that could change. Moving into 2020, that could change rapidly because we're going to have a very aggressive capital improvement program moving on in 2020. So moving into 2021, that could change. Now, one of the what we have been doing since 2014 with respect to capital, we've been, as I said, transferring $1 million into the capital program, and that's what's called a pay-as-you-go. Now, that is good because what we're doing is we're paying down on our debt service when we floated bonds in years past. We pay approximately $3.2 million in debt service, and we're paying that down. And Moody's, the bond rating service, they notice that. Everybody gets rated every year or every other year, and so our bond rating went up. So what does that mean when your bond rating goes up? That means that if you do float a bond, you're going to pay a lower interest rate. So it's very important, you know, to keep that bond rating up and keep it climbing. So we've been paying down our debt. It's just like you run your own budget at home, and if you have credit card debt, you want to try and pay it down. It's the same principle. Now, one of the items is that when you do capital pay as you go, there's 3 items that is that it is not as good. It takes longer to complete the capital projects, which is where we are right now. We have a lot of them backed up. And the amount of capital projects that you perform is limited. If you float a bond for $5 million, you can go out and spend $5 million and you can do a lot of things, but you got to pay it off. So we've been trying to, but we're at the point now, we've got to move ahead and fix more roads. And major unforeseen capital expenditures will have to be supported by the fund balance, which it has been. And our fund, we've moved ahead this year and we've done some capital programs, but the fund balance has still stayed healthy, which is a good thing. And I'll talk a little bit more about the fund balance as we move along. The other expense that is constantly in the forefront that council is aware of, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, is our post-retirement health benefits. We have had a lot of employees, mostly police, that have retired, and most of the employees have post-retirement health care. So when you have an individual retire, they're not 65, they are still getting health care from the municipality. Just them and their spouse, in some cases, but you have a person retired and they're getting post-retirement health benefits for them and their spouse, and you have a new person coming on, so you're getting it from both ends. And that's not going to start dropping off for another 9-10 years. And that's just an expense that we're under contractual obligation that we have to endure. Okay, end of the revenues. Council can see in the, and this will be online tomorrow, everybody will be able to take a look at it. Council can see that the budget this year is about $500,000 less than last year, and about 72% of our revenue comes from real estate, earned income tax, local services tax, and business tax. That's the lion's share of it. And the tax office collects the real estate tax. They usually collect about 97 to 98% of the real estate tax. Under revenue assumptions on page 5, council can see what our assessment is. Our assessment is approximately $2.3 billion worth of property here in Monroeville. Now, that has been going down a little bit. Now it's just started to level off just this year, and there's a graph on page 16 in the back of the budget. Council can look at it, and they can see that graph. It started to go down, and now it's starting to level off a little bit. And the reason being is we've had a lot of large properties that have reassessed through the years, one being the mall. They were reassessed. They went to the appeals board at the county, and they were granted a lessening of their assessment. That was a large one. We've had other ones, though, but that's the most glaring one. So it seems to be leveling off, though. Real estate taxes, we usually collect about $9 million. That stays steady. Earned income tax, about $7.6 million, and that's going to stay steady. Mercantile and business privilege tax will be probably estimating a slight increase of about $150,000. And the delinquent business and mercantile tax, that's going to be probably a decrease of $100,000 because the tax office has done a good job on those businesses that have not or have calculated their business tax incorrectly. Now that's going to start ebbing off, and it did last year, and it's going to continue this year. But that will go into the increase on the normal collection. As I was mentioned, our general fund reserve is good. We're estimating to have an unassigned fund balance of about $9.5 million at the end of 2020. And I'll explain that through the fund balance analysis at the end of the budget report here, budget message. Next year, we will probably have in our Pliget account, Pliget is Pennsylvania Local Government Investment Services, and we have our higher investments, our CDs in that gain a higher interest rate. We'll have approximately $8 million in that. So that's a good thing, again. Health benefit costs, they went up 4% this year, which, relatively speaking, isn't bad. It's more than last year. Our health benefit premiums went up 2.3% last year. This year, they went up 4%. And that equates to about, in absolute dollars, about $300,000. On the capital expense side, as I said, we have a debt service, and usually you should not have any more than 10% of your general fund that you should be paying on your debt service. We have been decreasing this. It was at 9.1% last year. We're going to be moving into 2020 about 9% of our general fund. And as I mentioned, I'm recommending a transfer of $2.5 million. As I said, I think that's going to be more as we move into the capital improvement program. We've also had some leases, which a good thing is we've paid down a lot of leases that we had to take out in 2014 and 15 for public works vehicles and police vehicles. And I'm here in the fire vehicles. And I'm here to say those will all be paid off except for the 2 fire trucks that we purchased in 2014. And the lease payment for those is about $107,000 per year. And there's a balance of about $562,000. We still have one lease payment on a garbage truck we have, and that'll be paid off. We just have purchased a pumper for number 5 fire, which was about $600,000, and we pay cash for it. And that's because we have a healthy fund balance. But in 2014, what we did is we leased that. So we're trying to stay away from the leases, we're trying to stay away from the debt, and we're trying to pay for things for cash. And that's because we have a good fund balance, but obviously that fund balance will decrease the more we pay.
$18,000 discount for that.
Yep.
Yeah, we got exactly, Mr. Harvey said we got an $18,000 discount because we paid cash for that. Okay, as I was mentioning, the Pollution Control and Flood Reduction Fund was instituted last year. and that has taken in approximately $3.2 million. That's a typo in your, we'll have to correct that. I think it's in your budget. It's about $3.2 million. And just to add to that, for those people who have not paid that $120, there will be a delinquent letter going out November 1st for those people who have not paid. All right, just as an aside.
I'll take that out of my report.
Okay, you're going to take that, okay.
Yeah, there's over 3,000 households that have not paid. So you're going to get fined eventually or liened. So if you can get in by the end of the month, it'd be great. Okay.
Okay, as far as OPEB, I mentioned about, OPEB is other post-employment benefits. That the lion's share of that is the health care that our retirees enjoy up until the age of 65, and then they go on what's called a Freedom Blue plan, a Medicare plan, a supplement plan. The OPEB fund on investment is doing very well. We have approximately $7 million in our OPEB fund. But as I said before, $3.6 million of that is owed back to the general fund because the general fund has been subsidizing the post-retirement health benefits. And most communities in Pennsylvania do not have an OPEB fund. We're one of the very few, maybe 3 or 4 in the Pittsburgh area that have an OPEB fund. And I applaud the council 10 years ago that decided to take and put $5 million into that OPEB fund. And that is another reason why we got a very good rating from Moody's Bond Service. What we're supposed to put into the OPEB fund is $3.2 million a year. We just can't afford to do that. It's just impossible. The liability on the OPEB fund is about $39 million. Our liability on the OPEB fund, I've said this before publicly for the last 3-4 years, is more than I would say 2/3 of the municipalities in the Pittsburgh area, than their pensions, are liability just in the OPEB. So that is a very big liability, and it's not going to decrease until about the year 2029. Okay? And as I mentioned before, we usually transferred $1 million into the OPEB fund, and what we did is we took the winnings off the table. We've been able to do that because the stock market has done well, but this year we're not going to do that because it owes the general fund back. The other item is the big expense is obviously the pension plans, which Council here just passed a resolution distributing that money to our investment firms, PMRS and Janney Montgomery, respectively. We put approximately $3.2 million into what is called a minimum municipal obligation, otherwise known as an MMO. Also, what I have put into the budget are for a few positions because I believe we should start succession planning here in Monroeville. We have a lot of key individuals on staff that could walk out the door tomorrow and retire. And we should begin to plan for those people leaving. Now, nobody has indicated to me out of the key positions that they're going to retire. But 2-3 years down the road, we should be prepared and we should be hiring people to replace them. So, what I have put into the budget is a salary for a deputy chief of police, which we have had before, and I've also put in for an assistant manager. I've also put in for an extra IT person because the information technology is just increasing, especially in the police department. But not only in the police department, there is a lot of IT that we need to catch up on in order to inform the community so you can communicate with us better and we can communicate with you. One example is what Mrs. Gatos mentioned tonight about Nixle. We started that about 2 years ago, and I think it's been fantastic. People get a notice, a text notice, if a road has been closed down due to an accident, and I think it's great. Those are the kind of things that we need to do to communicate with you. We need to get an app online so you can go onto the app on your phone. And we're working on that right now. So there's a lot of IT items that we have to do in the community here. Another item that I have budgeted for is the 2020 budget contains a $15,000 expense in the manager's section, contracted services 2730. This is to begin a program with an outside consultant to act as an economic development advocate for the municipality. An outside consultant of this nature will identify retail markets that are suitable for Monroeville, provide retail analysis, identify and evaluate differences between competing shopping areas such as Cranberry and Ross and others, and the lifestyle of our residents and the people who visit Monroeville for shopping or personnel reasons. Hopefully, this will become an annual expense that will pay for itself with a noticeable increase in property and business taxes, in addition to providing our residents with retail and services that are enticing to them. I've been investigating this for the last 3-4 months. I've been talking to a couple outside consultants, and I'll be giving council more information on this when the budget hearings start.
Looking forward to it.
Monroeville needs to have an advocate for them to be able to ascertain what kind of retail is going to be a win-win situation here in Monroeville. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I gave a little presentation of where Monroeville is with respect to the growth and decline of cities over a 100-year lifespan. And we're at a point where we have to be able to get the kind of retail, the kind of industry, and the kind of office space in here that's going to be successful. Not every retail that comes in here is going to be successful. I bet you if I hear it every other week, when are we getting a Trader Joe's?
Oh, God,
Well, I mean, I wish I had a $20 bill for every time somebody asked me that.
I'd even take it to
Well, if Trader Joe's would be successful here, maybe they are looking to come in, I don't know.
I wish.
But if they would be successful here, you could rest assured, if there was money to be made, they would be here. And maybe it isn't Trader Joe's, maybe it's something else that's like a Trader Joe's. So there's a lot of businesses that come in here, but we have to be proactive, I believe, in seeking retail, and not only retail, IT companies. We have, Pittsburgh itself is growing tremendously with respect to IT. Why not Monroeville? Why not here? We have a lot of office space here with respect to the Westinghouse, and I think we should start to lead the charge on that. Instead of people coming to us, we should have a company that could be able to slice and dice our information that we have. Okay, the last item on the budget report is the fund balance analysis. Last year, according to our CAF, our Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, we ended up with about $14.4 million as a fund balance. And out of a $35 million general fund, that's pretty good. The GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, they're recommending 20%, which they increased that a lot in the past years. It used to be like 5%. We have our own resolution, our own policy, where we keep 10% in reserves. So we ended up with about $14.4 million. Now, at the end of this year, we're estimating that we're going to have an increase of the fund balance of about $700,000. And that's a good thing, okay, because Josie and I have been keeping an eye on that as we go through the year right now. And we, as I said before, we have started spending on capital items this year because we need to. And I'm just excited that we're not below and we have a negative on our fund balance moving into this year. The fact that we have a positive, I think, is a good sign. Now, moving into 2020, with our 10% general fund reserve policy, the proposed usage for the 2020 fund balance is about pushing $2.4 million. Now, these are estimates. They're nothing set in stone. So we're going to be spending, according to the budget here, about $2.4 million. Now, the lion's share of that, obviously, is a $2.5 million transfer to our capital that I mentioned. And that is probably going to be more. And it's money well spent. It's your tax dollars, but it's money well spent for roads, vehicles, these buildings being maintained. We're beginning a new roof on this building right here before the end of the year, depending on the weather. So there's a lot of items that have to be spent. The library needs a new HVAC system. And these things have been let go for about 5-6 years or so. But it's time now we have to get them fixed. And like I said, it's your money we're spending, and you need to know where it's going. So at the end of next year, we're looking at having a unassigned fund balance of $9.5 million, and that's including our 10% reserve. But in actuality, we should have about $12 million in our coffers at the end of December 2020. Now, that depends on how much we spend on capital, because I'm not advocating floating any bonds, because that just has more debt service we're adding to that. So that concludes the my budget message. If anybody has any questions for when it comes time for the public to come up and ask any questions, or if council has any questions now.
Council, any comments? We have a lot of work to do, and we'll have multiple hearings and a lot of opportunities to ask questions and speak about this. But excellent job, Mr. Little, and excellent job to your staff.
Well, one other thing I do want to mention is that somebody come up here, I want to be able to answer one question somebody come up here and ask, well, what would a new swimming pool cost? And I think we provided that to council a couple, 3 months ago. A new swimming pool would cost and this is replacing the same size swimming pool as Bel Air, and that'd be about $4 million. Okay, so
Minus utilities.
just to answer that question.
Without utilities.
Without utilities?
Right. Without the utility running.
All the utilities are there.
Additional,
I mean,
okay, sorry, but yeah, it's part of it, but yeah.
Also, just to, as the mayor
apologize.
said, we start this budget process in August, and council understands, there's a lot of people hours that go into it. And Josie Rock and Tina Mueller, my secretary, Dara, Jill Dawes-Cat, I hope Darlene, all the people put in a lot of time, and not to mention all the department heads that put in time on their budget. So this whole process takes well over 2 months to put together. Now, council obviously has, when we start the budget hearings, when you have your input, and then council says, well, maybe we don't want to do this, or we may want to do something else. All right, but this is my recommendation to council and the public. Okay? That concludes my report, I believe.
Very good.